I want to say a special welcome to Ruth Lukabyo. Ruth, thank you so much for coming and joining us today.
Thanks for having me. It's great. Great to meet you all and to be here.
Ruth will be happy to chat with you afterwards because you're going to get very interested in what Ruth has to say today.
I hope so.
And my first job, of course, is to introduce Ruth to you. The way I should do this, perhaps, is, Ruth, you're an author, a lecturer, a mother. You're even married to a pastor. Mm-hmm. How do you keep all those things in balance?
I think balance is always a funny thing to aim for, isn't it? I don't really aim for balance, but, just how can I serve the Lord in the place where He's put me at the moment with the gifts I have, with the resources I have. So I guess I'm in a happy position at the moment where I have 3 young adults now. So they don't need me as much. I have more time. So I have a bit more time now to put into research and writing that I didn't used to have. And I work part-time at YouthWorks College. I love my work at YouthWorks College. I've done that a long time.
So you lecture 3 days.
I lecture 3 days.
You research and write 2 days.
Yep.
And what do you do? And the rest, you've got to fit everything else into 2 days.
Well.
There you go.
Yeah, that's right.
Well done. All right. That's skimming over all kinds of things. But Ruth, we've got you up here tonight because we want to talk about youthfulness.
Yes.
And we're in a series, if you've been with us, we're in a series on the new religions, kind of the passionate ideas people have that they almost worship, things they're very convinced of. And we've talked about identity, we've talked about mindfulness, and we come to youthfulness and we're just going to change the whole thing up by doing it as an interview tonight. You can go to Morning Church podcast if you want to, and you'll see a different way of doing this. But tonight,
I should have listened to your sermon from this morning, shouldn't I?
Well, it was mostly you, Ruth. We played clips of you anyway. So, the great thing is we can now kind of interact a little bit and explore different avenues. And what we want to talk about tonight with Ruth is her work at YouthWorks College, because that'll just help us understand a bit of the background to where Ruth's coming from. And then we want to talk about the book, because you've got some insights in your book, and we've got a table full of your books up the back about the history of youth ministry in Sydney region. And again, that's really helping us see where we've come from to be here. But we also really want to get to your thoughts on our culture as well, our cult of youth, we might even say. And I'm really interested in what you have to say about what are we thinking there when we value youth, and how does that line up with the Bible? So we're going to do all that in 20 minutes. Let's see how we go. All right, so my first question is an odd one. You work at YouthWorks College. This is an Anglican college, but we also have Moore College, which is an Anglican Bible college as well. Why do we have 2 colleges?
Very good question. It's actually our 21st birthday this year as well, YouthWorks College. So, yeah. Well, Moore College, its big goal is to train up ordained ministers to, serve in our churches. So it does that really, really well. But there's also, it's very important that we also train people to be able to be youth and kids ministers and young adults ministers. And I think for 2 reasons. The reasons are, first of all, the priority of youth, that we need to prioritise that ministry, because the stats keep on saying that about almost 80% of people become Christians before the age of 20.
Is that right? 80% of people who are Christians became Christians before the age of 20.
That's right.
Wow, okay.
Yeah. So we need to prioritise that, and which you do in your church, I see, like one of your priorities. So that's,
it is.
Yes.
Number 2, up there, that little hand-holding picture, making young disciples.
Yeah, fantastic. So that's one reason why it's really important to have a college that trains up youth and kids ministers. The second reason, I think, is because it's a contextual ministry. So young people are different from adults, developmentally, where they're up to in terms of their growth, and also culturally, the sort of culture they live in is different from the culture of adults. So at YouthWorks College, we do the normal Bible college stuff, like Old Testament, New Testament, church history, but we're always asking the question, how does this apply to a young person? How can we teach this to a young person? And then we also include other subjects like sexuality and identity, and kids ministry, youth ministry, to really nut down how do we do ministry in this context. It's kind of a bit like cross-cultural ministry, I think. A missionary needs particular cross-cultural training. A kids or youth minister needs particular contextual training as well.
Great. So just like we've got St Andrew's Hall in Melbourne for training our missionaries with CMS, we've got YouthWorks College for training those, trying to reach those within the youth space. All right,
That's
fantastic. Now, YouthWorks trains in a couple of different kind of areas, physically and what they're training people for. So you've got Year 13 down at Loftus, and you're based in Newtown training diploma courses. Great. Now, we've just had 2 young people finish Year 13 here.
Awesome.
So we're already kind of convinced, but tell us, why should someone consider going to YouthWorks at the end of Year 12 for Year 13, or doing a diploma course there? Can you give us the sell?
Yeah, the sell. Well, Year 13 is an awesome gap year. So it gives you it helps you, like, turbocharges Christian formation to give you this experience of Bible teaching and Christian community and mission, so that you can really grow as a Christian and build a really strong foundation before you start work or uni. So it's great to take a year out to really invest in your Christian life. So that's Year 13.
Great.
Newtown, vocational ministry. The reason why you would come to YouthWorks College is if you're passionate about kids, youth, young adult ministry, because we specialise in that. It's also different from Moore College. I think this is important to say, in that it's kind of like an apprenticeship. So you might do MTS in your church a couple of days a week, or be a volunteer in your church a few days a week, and then you come to YouthWorks College for 2 days a week. So you're both learning your ministry in the church context or camping ministry context, and you're learning in the classroom, and you're integrating the two.
Great. For those of us who remember Pete Ray, that's what Pete Ray did a few years ago from this church as well. All right. Today we're talking about youthfulness. Perhaps we can even sneak in something about that already. You work with young people day to day. So what insights do you have into the strengths and challenges for youth in the 21st century?
The strengths and challenges. I love young adults, especially. So teenagers are pretty cool too, but I love young adults. And I think it's because teenagers and young adults, they are full of passion and energy. We got from that Ecclesiastes passage, like, enjoy your youth. There's a real joy that comes from youth. They haven't yet experienced a lot of suffering. They're open to all these possibilities in their life. They haven't sort of been tied down by big decisions like work or marriage or children, all those things that becoming responsible. So I think one of the great strengths of youth is that passion and energy and joy.
Wonderful.
And in terms of Christian faith too, that means, so the young adults I work with, they're just really open to growing and to thinking about how to be a Christian in the 21st century. They're really open to the work of the Spirit in their life, I think, in a way that sometimes older adults, we're a bit set in our ways, but they're very open to change, which I love.
Fantastic. The challenges, though, what's the flip side of that?
The challenges.
Yeah.
I think one of the challenges might be the flip side, like when you are open and to possibilities and you haven't yet got a lot of responsibilities, there is a sense that you can be just a little bit too open, not responsible, not self-controlled, that the Bible, I think, warns us about some of the temptations, the sins of youth, which are things like, being arrogant or not self-controlled, argumentative. So there's a downfall. There's temptations that we all face at different stages of our life.
And are there pressures as well, like in the mental well-being? Is that something you see on the rise amongst young people?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, I appreciated the prayer too from Jennifer today about I think in my own ministry at YouthWorks College, definitely the students are becoming more and more struggling with mental health issues, with anxiety in particular. So I mean, it's even just little things like getting the essay in. There's so much anxiety that they have to struggle with. And the pandemic, of course, has only made this worse.
All right, let's then, that's where you're coming from. Let's switch to perhaps where ministering to youth has come from in the Sydney area. Let's talk about your book. So you've got a book, it's at the back. It's basically about what is it that's happened, particularly in the 30s, 40s, 50s, is that right? That actually was a huge change in strategy that we benefit from now in the way we minister to youth, and we don't want to lose it, if I can summarise so lightly. So what is it that happened in the 30s and the 40s and the 50s that was such a turning point?
Yeah. In the 30s in particular, why I was attracted to the 1930s, I know it seems like a long, long time ago, but it seems like all these organisations started that still are the foundation for how we do youth ministry today. So it was like this foundational time. So youth fellowships started in the churches, Crusader Union started, ICF groups started, the Evangelical Union at Sydney Uni. So suddenly all these organisations began all at the same time. So I was struck just by that.
I can't not interrupt at this point and
Sure.
say I believe family members of in this room are people who founded Crusaders. Is that right? Yeah, there we go. Our song leader today is the granddaughter of Howard Guinness, who actually founded Crusaders, and EU as
He's
well.
a hero.
Kind
Yes,
of,
EU as well. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
All right, and EU was founded in the Evangelical Union at Sydney Uni was founded in the 30s as well.
1930, yeah.
There you go. All right.
Yeah. Yes. Can I talk a bit more about that?
Please do.
First of all, the reason why I think these things happened, or all this energy in youth ministry, was partly because being a teenager was a new thing. So before 1930, there weren't very many high schools in Australia.
Sorry, there weren't many high schools.
No,
right.
Very few. So what happened was that you went to primary school, and often there were extended sort of primary schools. You'd finish at the age of about 14. And then you might go to some kind of other training college, but then you're expected to go to work. So a lot of people were they were considered adults at the age of 14, which is very different today. But in the 1930s, 1940s, we realised that we needed to extend education. And so high schools became more and more of a thing. People were going to high schools, and youth culture developed so that there was this in-between stage between being a child and being an adult. And the word teenage was only invented in the 1930s.
Right.
Yeah. So there was suddenly this need for this ministry for this stage of life. I'd love to say more about Howard Guinness as well. He's such a hero. Howard Guinness came to Australia from England, and he came with student ministry, the InterVarsity Fellowship. He was trying to establish and encourage evangelical youth ministry in the universities, and also he looked at the schools as well. And the reason was a lot of the youth ministry had become quite theologically liberal. So there's this great story of Paul White, who also helped set up Crusaders and worked with the IVF. He went to Sydney University, went to a Bible study, and the person who was running the Bible studies who was a Methodist minister, began tearing leaves out of the Bible. And he said to Paul White, you're not thinking clearly enough. You have to give up some of these things that you've been thinking. And Paul White ended up in these big arguments with this minister, and eventually he was asked not to come to the Bible study anymore. So there were evangelical students at the university, and Paul White was 19 at the time. He's a young guy at university, who were evangelicals. There was a small little group of them that met together up in the main quad, and Howard Guinness, he wanted to encourage this ministry. He helped them come out of the tower and set up a proper organisation, an Evangelical Union. and open to the university that proclaim Jesus Christ as Lord. Howard Guinness also went around to a lot of the private schools, and he gave evangelistic talks there, and then he encouraged young people to set up their own crusader groups where they studied the Bible together in smaller groups.
Wow, this is all in the 30s. This is
all in the 30s.
In Sydney.
Yes.
Wow, there you go.
Yes.
All right, and so historically your book traces this and talks about how this kind of flowed through. But then as a result, in the 50s and 60s, numbers of young people in churches kind of exploded, and there were youth ministries of hundreds of people and churches with waiting lists. You know, I think you told me about
right.
Kingsgrove had a huge waiting list just to get into Sunday school. But that's not how it is now. We've come on to another stage now where actually the numbers have dropped off a cliff, and of course huge societal changes have happened as part of that, and we find ourselves in a new situation. But I still want to talk about what was it we really learned in the 30s that we perhaps should make sure we keep doing now. And in your book you talk about going from a ministry to youth to a ministry of youth. Can you explain why is that such a powerful strategy?
Yes. What I argued is that before the 1930s, ministry with youth was understood as like religious education. So you taught young people the Bible. You gathered together in Sunday schools, and you taught them the biblical stories, and you taught them doctrines. So it was about adults sort of teaching young people. But what was wonderful about the strategy of the 1930s, I think, is that young people were given a lot of leadership opportunities, and they were encouraged to do the ministry themselves. So, for example, we were talking about the crusader groups in schools. Howard Guinness actually wrote a book which was for school students called Swords Drawn.
Swords Drawn?
Yes, we wouldn't call it that today probably, but this language of war. Swords Drawn. He encouraged young Christians to gather together with other Christians at school, start praying, then go to your school principal and ask for permission to set up a group, a crusader group, set up your group, advertise, and then you give the talks, you give the testimonies. It was all about the young people themselves taking leadership and being trained and having opportunities to do ministry themselves. So sharing Jesus with their friends and encouraging each other by reading the Bible together. So I was really, really struck when I was doing my research at the incredible initiative that young people took. And it made me think, maybe we don't expect enough of our young people, that we should actually encourage them to take up more initiative, more leadership.
So the danger might be that we see the pressures young people are under, and we try and say, no, let us do this for you. We go back to ministering to young people instead of bringing them in to actually take responsibility. And as you said, there used to be adults at 14.
Yeah.
So perhaps we've underestimated our young people. Now, we've just started a new youth ministry on Friday nights. How's that going to help us? There's a youth group at the church where you are as well. It's got 100 kids last I heard. So have you seen it done there in a way that's helpful as we start down that path with a new ministry?
Well, there's a few things that we've been trying. In the group that I'm involved with, one of the key things we were encouraging young people to do is actually learn to articulate their faith a bit more. So, I find maybe young people just haven't had a chance much to talk about what it means for them to be a Christian. And so we try to get some of our young people, like, this is in a year 7 to 9 group, just to say what's the Lord been doing in their life inside our group, and to give them a bit of more confidence in being a bit more of a public Christian and to be speaking more about what being a Christian means to them. That's just one idea. Another idea that I've seen in practice is group triplets for prayer, where there's the year 11 kid is praying with 2 other younger kids, and so they have kind of a leadership and sort of sharing their Christian lives together, but really encouraging that leadership, that initiative. It's not just really engaging the kids in God's word and what it means for them personally and how they can be a disciple of Jesus, not just teaching them truths.
That's so helpful. So it doesn't just have to be you're doing the talk this week. It actually
That's
could
right.
be
Yeah.
you're just we'll break up into groups and you'll have some younger kids and you'll share with them, or you'll just learn how to speak your faith publicly in a bit more than you used to. All right, that's so helpful. All right, so let's turn to the wider culture then.
Mm-hmm.
Part of your book is being a bit of a historian of wider youth culture, and I guess we want to talk about the cult of youth tonight in a way. What do you think it is about youthfulness that we're trying to hold on to, that we kind of almost idolise the period of youth? What's going on there?
It was interesting, again, reading Ecclesiastes in that context, because Ecclesiastes recognises that there is something, that young people are beautiful and they haven't experienced much suffering and they're full of this joy and energy. And I sometimes think, I wish I had that energy. I wish I looked so beautiful. There is I guess we are rightly attracted to youth because of its freshness and its joy and the openness to so many possibilities. We might want to just hold on to that, I think.
Okay, so there's a good thing there in acknowledging, like the Bible does, that there's vitality.
Yes,
in youth.
the vitality of youth.
Is there a pitfall, though? Do you think we as a culture value it too much? Is there a pitfall there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the truth is that we can't stay in that stage of life forever. And in fact, the Bible doesn't want us to. That as we become older, we have more and more of a responsibility to minister to the next generation, like the Titus passage that we were looking at, for the older women, to care for the younger women. There's responsibilities that come with marriage and work and family and serving the people in our community and in our friends and family, that we can't hold on to the irresponsibility and joy of youth, I guess, that we need to be able to serve and to persevere in our faith and to in fact, to suffer is part of life. As we go on in our life, there'll be lots of things that we go through, that being a Christian disciple means to persevere through all the difficulties and challenges of life.
So does the Bible value youth or maturity or both?
I would say both.
Both, okay.
I think the Bible definitely values youth. And we might not recognise that enough. There's a classic story when Jesus encourages the children to come to him. That was in a society that really didn't value youth, actually. In the biblical world, it was the older people who were to be respected, and younger people were to be ignored and, to be pushed off in the corner. Whereas Jesus encourages children to come to him. They're important. Then throughout the Bible, there's so many stories about young people who God uses in amazing ways. So I'm thinking about Miriam in the story of Moses. She's a teenage girl who helps save Moses and leads to the salvation of Israel. You've got David is a young man when he defeats Goliath. Later on in the New Testament, you've got Timothy, who's a very, a young man again. There's all these young people that God uses to serve him and to build his kingdom. So yes, youth is valued.
But age is also valued.
Age is also valued, absolutely. And I think if you go particularly to the Ecclesiastes and Proverbs, to the wisdom literature, that talks a lot about the wisdom of those who are older. Because an older person has been through the ups and downs, all the different experiences of life, and learnt to fear the Lord in the midst of all those different experiences. So there's a wisdom, there's a depth there's a maturity to older people that a younger person just can't have because they hasn't had that life experience.
Now, how would you apply that? Since you're here, we're going to employ you in a bit of a practical matter.
Yes.
Here at 5 o'clock, this is our most diverse service in a way. We have.
I love it.
We have from there's no young kids here normally, but from teenagers up to mature age. How could we kind of follow that biblical model of perhaps integrating better? Have you seen this done? How do churches? What's the best practice for intergenerational kind of ministry and fellowship?
I think there's two things that I thought of that really help. Well, first of all, it's just the relationships. So at morning tea or supper, going out of your way to speak, to go out of your comfort zone. So if you're a younger person, to actually say hello to an older person. If you're an older person, I think sometimes older people feel awkward. I do feel awkward sometimes that a teenager wouldn't want to speak to me.
Yeah, do I have to talk about Minecraft and stuff
Yeah.
to speak to someone younger?
I think if you're just friendly and nice and learn someone's name, those relationships can be very special. You don't have to learn Minecraft. And so get out of your comfort zone a bit.
Okay.
And I think weekends away, like congregational weekends away, are really helpful for that, because you actually, have meals together, have games together. All those relational building stuff are really helpful and special. The second thing I thought of is like serving together. Just in your own experience, just serving alongside somebody else helps to connect you to each other and to share being brothers and sisters in Christ together. And so I think, are there ways that you can serve together with younger people? Is there, just on morning tea perhaps, having the younger people and older people serve morning tea together? Or is there a mission that you can go on together with the younger people? Or I like to do things like I'm a camp mum at the youth camp, or just looking for opportunities, ways that you can serve together with the younger people.
Fantastic. That's so practical, and probably you've put ideas in our heads already. Something else that's on my heart as well is, though, that if you looked across the Upper Mountains, the total youth group attendance of the Upper Mountains is probably under 60. But there are hundreds.
Really depressing,
there are
isn't it?
hundreds and hundreds of youth who are not connected with churches or Christian groups in any way. How could we draw on some of the things you've talked about, perhaps to better reach? There's no silver bullet, but what are the things you think, having seen the history over time of youth ministry in Sydney, what would be important to focus on, do you think, to reach out?
There is no easy answer, is there? And we can get overwhelmed by the numbers and just find that depressing and disheartening. But I think I would say two things. I would focus on youth to youth. So those 60 young people, invest in those 60 young people. They're the ones who are in the schools and who have friends with non-Christians and understand the culture and understand the place they're in. So they're the ones that should be doing the ministry, so that they're living out their lives as public Christians. Encourage them to go public with their faith, to tell a few friends that they are Christian, to invite friends to youth group, to church. So I would encourage your young people to become more public Christians. And that can be hard, so they need all the love and the prayers and support that we can give them. So youth to youth, I think, is really important. Secondly, be encouraged by the wonder of Christian community. We're talking about anxiety and the kind of suffering that young people are suffering at the moment. Christian community, in its intergenerational beauty here in the evening congregation and at youth, at your youth group as well, the kind of love and support and grace that's there is a beautiful thing. So invite non-Christians into it and allow them to experience that Christian community. It will really point them to Jesus and his love and grace. So youth to youth and the beauty of Christian community.
And I think when we were talking about this earlier, we talked about just that importance of schools ministry as well, and
Absolutely.
youth-led schools ministries.
Yes.
Trying to make sure there's something in each school. Okay.
Yeah.
Ruth, we've covered a lot of ground very quickly, and I'm sure people will want to buttonhole you afterwards and talk about some of these matters more. I just want to thank you for coming all the way, even just to have this little chat, and for pre-filming some things we used with Morning Church this morning as well. So thank you very much. We won't clap you. We'll praise God in our hearts, and we'll warmly welcome you after the service. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks, John.
We're going to have
Thanks,
our
everyone.
closing song.